Fly chick coming through. Nice to meet you. Glad you came too. Like you said, when you know you got moves. You spit game and you know you spit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special deep dive episode of the Fast Lane Collective. We're so excited to have you here. Just to preface, these deep dive episodes are recorded in advance. So if you're ever listening to any of these and you're like, wait, why aren't you talking about Max Verstappen's big win recently or Isack Hadjar's recent first podium or whatever, it's because these are pre-recorded. So we love to do these. They're fun. We often do them in the off season or maybe when there's a break because we really like to take the chance to really dive deep. These are why these are called deep dive episodes, into maybe a driver, or we did one last year on the first female head race engineer, and you guys really seem to love them. So this year we want to do more of them. So welcome to the first deep dive episode we have for 2026. I've got Daniela with me on this one. Daniela, how excited are you for our first deep dive episode?
I'm very excited because these are what I requested for this season. I said,
Yes.
guys, looking at how well our Laura Muller episode went last year, please can we bring these back? And both yourself, Brianna, and Yaz said, absolutely. So I'm very excited because these are the kind of content that I'll go away and listen to. So I'm excited that other people enjoy listening to these and that we can bring this as part of a new series onto this year's episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited too. And these are fun because you don't always get to do these deep dives with individuals, not just racers, but people in the motorsport world. So I'm excited to bring more of this type of content to the F1 sphere, the community. So for this episode, you're probably wondering, okay, tell us, who the heck are you deep diving into today? We are deep diving into none other than what I would call the rookie standout of the 2025 season, Isack Hadjar, V-Carb driver, now promoted to Red Bull for the 2026 season. And it's going to be so awesome to dive into his life, his experience. I personally did not know a ton about him when he came into Formula One. Daniela, did you know more about Isack Hadjar, or was he kind of just a mystery for you?
I did know a bit about Isack Hadjar because I am a Formula 2 and Formula 3 fan. So he has been on my radar pretty much since he debuted in Formula 3. So yeah, I have been following his career for a bit. But I will admit, I was not expecting him to have the season that he had for his debut in Formula 1. But, sometimes these drivers surprise you. And it wasn't because he had a poor junior career, because actually he's had a very solid junior career. It was more, I think, the fact that any time he was in either the Red Bull car or V-Carb car, either for testing or jumping in for an FP1 session, I just felt like he wasn't quite getting to grips with it in other ways that other rookies were. So that kind of put me on the fence a little bit. But I have loved seeing him blossom this past year, and obviously then go from his first race in Australia to then being, doing his whole entire season, getting a podium, and then making that transition now up to Red Bull. I think it's a very exciting career, and I'm excited to look back at him.
Yeah, I think there is something about Isack Hadjar that just attracts people to him, not just as a driver, but his personality as well. He's a very relaxed, laid back type of driver, but at the same time, a very intense, very passionate driver as well. He kind of flips that switch on when he gets into the cockpit, which obviously a lot of these drivers do. But to me, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but how Oscar Piastri is this kind of mellow, calm, just level-headed guy. Oscar is as well, but in a different way. He gives me Daniel Ricciardo kind of life is beautiful, I'm taking it day by day kind of vibes. But when he's in that car, he is so in the zone to the point where he is constantly screaming. I mean, he's known for his classic just screaming over the radio messages. I mean, who can forget, oh no, I broccoli car! No one can forget that. And I think he really did come out in his F1 rookie season and really just surprised a lot of people. I know obviously we had a lot of rookies last year to watch and a lot of rookies to choose from and get behind. Kimi Antonelli obviously being he is the youngest rookie on this team. We obviously had a lot of hopes for Oliver Behrman, but Isack Hadjar just kind of stood out to not just us, but I think the rest of the world. And obviously with him being promoted from the Red Bull Junior to the Red Bull car sitting next to Max Verstappen this year, a lot more eyes and a lot more pressure will be on this young man. But before we get to where he currently sits now, let's take it back. Like we said, we're diving deep in this episode and we're going back to the very beginnings of his career. I found it really interesting when he was asked kind of like, how did you get into motorsports? He also said the movie Cars, just like Liam Lawson. And he also said he's kind of bitter that Liam Lawson got to tell that story first. He was like, Cars was also my thing, and that's what got me into Formula One. Do you find it interesting, Daniela, that we have two drivers on the grid around the same age as each other, or they might be the same age, him and Liam Lawson, he and Liam Lawson, but inspired to get into motorsports from an animated Disney Pixar movie? Is that kind of crazy or bizarre?
I think that it actually doesn't surprise me that much because Cars was such a big phenomenon. Like, I remember absolutely loving it. It was, for me, like, such a like core memory in my mind of like my childhood, and it has such a special place in my heart that I'm not surprised that it encouraged other people to then take up motorsport because of it. So yeah, and also I do kind of feel for Isack because everybody knew that this was Liam's favorite film. It became like so much like social media coverage from VCarb themselves were kind of perpetuating that whole idea of like Liam Lawson lives, breathes Lightning McQueen. And poor Isack was sat there like, but I really like that film too, and that's why I'm an F1 driver. So I do feel for him because he got completely overshadowed by Liam
He
Lawson
really
with that
did.
one.
He really did. I didn't know that really about him until I was, doing the research for this episode. And I was like, oh, also a big Cars fan? And I am a huge Pixar fan. I just love Pixar as a creative and being in the creative industry. The way Pixar crafts stories is just amazing. And it's amazing to see that a movie that had no human beings in it, no human characters, okay, inspired two human beings to get into motorsport. Isack said, obviously, being obsessed with cars as a kid, as a very young kid, he watched it a lot. He even remembers when they got the DVD, which is just crazy to even think about. They can remember that as young, but eventually that led him into wanting to watch Formula One, which then obviously lit the flame of, like I could do this for fun or a sport too. And that's what led him into karting eventually, which I think is so interesting. Now, his first competitive kart racing, well, he got in a car for the kart for the first time when he was around 6, which is, would you say, a typical age for people in Europe when it comes to karting?
Yeah, definitely typical age for kids to start out karting. This has not come as a surprise to me. He got his first car, I think, for his first kart for his 7th birthday. And then from there, like, that's where his career started. It'd been about a year that he'd been watching F1 after becoming obsessed with cars and then venturing into Formula One. And then that's kind of where his career took off, was in karting, as most commonly for many, many drivers.
Yeah. And he started competitively racing around 8 years old. So not long after he got his first car and jumped in. I think a really cool thing about Isack Hadjar is he's obviously French, but from Algerian descent. And he came from a really normal background. His parents really kind of, like a lot of stories that we hear, Lewis Hamilton and other drivers, their parents give up a lot to have their kids get into karting to begin with, but then when they realize they've got this skill and this talent, giving up a lot more to try and help them achieve that goal, which is just crazy. And just like Lewis Hamilton, Isack Hadjar's dad was his mechanic, which is kind of crazy to think as well, because his dad is actually a physicist, which is crazy. So obviously a very smart individual. He'd probably learn anything if he didn't. Obviously he could. He became Isaac's engineer, and his mom became his manager and still is his manager to this very day, which I did not know. And I think that's really cool. We hear a lot of these drivers, their dads become their managers. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton's father was his manager for a while. Same with Esteban Ocon. But hearing that the mom is the manager, I'm like, yes, a momager. We're here for this. It's like a Kris Jenner of Formula One. That's what I'm going to refer to Isack Hadjar's mom as. She's probably like on the sidelines being like, you're doing great, sweetie. Like, But, I love to hear that and also just see how, often we don't sometimes see the moms or the female characters in these drivers' lives really have, like, a real kind of job or role besides being the support person, so it's really cool to see that Isack Hadjar's mom is also his manager still to this day, which is awesome. Um but yeah, he started kind of doing that racing at 8 years old and quickly ran up the ranks. I know, Daniela, you had written down a bunch of kind of achievements and goals he had made um, during his karting career. Let's maybe dive into some of those for the people.
Yeah. So by like he kind of started racing karts from 2014 to 2018, and by 2017 he'd already made that step up into international karting, which I think is when we really started to see, okay, this is talent out there that could potentially be a future F1 driver. It's
Hmm.
when we see them go from just kind of regional championships to making that step up to international. This is when the big bucks need to start coming in, because yes, it costs a lot of money anyway to kart just in your own country, regionally, nationally. As soon as you take it international, like, that is such a big step up. And from my time getting to interview drivers throughout their careers, I have heard time and time again of like the sacrifice it takes to be able to make that jump up and take your career internationally.
Yeah,
And I think Isack would have had the same challenges and difficulties. Drivers in the past have said that like they've had to sacrifice so much. Their parents haven't been able to go with them because they couldn't afford the flight tickets. That these children, they were children, and they would
yeah,
have to go off by themselves, meet their team on the other side, or like they'll have to be escorted through like security and on the plane and stuff, and like be with total strangers and get to the next country to then go and race. And that was their lives. They gave
yeah,
up a lot of school, they gave up friendships. I think we forget how much of a childhood is actually lost on these drivers. Like, they don't have the same friendships and they don't have the same teenage experiences, and they miss out on a lot of school. But then that also means that they miss out on a lot of like social gatherings and like social skills. They're
yeah,
not able to. I feel like we see this actually a lot of like drivers actually not being able to communicate um with like people in a way that isn't just like between them and their race engineer. Like,
yeah.
I think they struggle with the media because they're not used to having those interactions like throughout their life growing up, because they didn't have like all of those skills that they would gain from being in school all the time and like joining other clubs, because like motorsport can be quite a lonely thing, because you literally get in your cart or your car, you put your helmet on, you've got your visor down, there's no one else around you. Now, you are in communication with your engineer, but you're still like quite isolated, and
Right.
everyone around you is your competitor. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's a really interesting dynamic that these kids go through to be able to have a career. And I'm guessing that Isack would have been just like them too.
Yeah, it's such a great point, Daniela, because in an interview that we've either already put out or will be putting out, I just had a conversation with a young racing driver, and hearing at the very young age that she's at what her life looks like on a daily basis, there is no time really for friends. There isn't even time for school. Actually, she has become homeschooled because of her decision to pursue her motorsport career, and is often around adults more than she is kids her own age. And when she is around kids her own age, she's at a racetrack that's mostly male dominated by uh, I wouldn't say men, but boys her age. And then on top of that, you're all in this motorsport bubble. So if you do have friends, they're often in that bubble and you're experiencing the same things together, which is a good and a bad thing. So you're right. Not only do they sacrifice money, family time, school time, they kind of sacrifice their entire childhood. So when you're a parent of a 9-year-old child who wants to pursue a Formula One motorsports career, I can't imagine what it's like as a parent. I can't imagine what Isack Hadjar's parents were thinking to send him, like, I'm not going to be able to go with my 9-year-old, or man, do I encourage my Isack to pursue racing and focus on that, or do we put as much emphasis on school? And I know in a lot of interviews, Isack Hadjar really does say his parents were very much more concerned with his education and more emphasis on that than they did on the karting. Not that they didn't want him to pursue it, but I get that as a parent. Like, you don't know if this is going to iron out for your 8-year-old. Like, you want to make sure they have legs to stand on if this motorsport thing doesn't work out. So to think how you navigate that as a child with your parents that are all new to this whole thing. Isack didn't come from a motorsport family, so figuring this out probably felt very much for the whole family and him like a walk in the dark, and having to give up these things to pursue this dream, which is really, really interesting. But it did work out for Isack so far. So I know he talks a lot about, it's not just the skill you have to have, it's also the right timing. And Isack has had some really great timing in his career, like you mentioned, in his karting career when he went into international. What kind of success did he have kind of in that space that kind of led him into this single-seater world that he's in now? You can go ahead and
Well,
find
he
it.
then kind of like moved on to doing Ginetta Junior Winter Series, which is then kind of more of like a sports car-esque championship.
Mhm.
And that was really kind of where his career started to then take off, because that was what propelled him into single-seaters. So he then went from that series into Formula 4. And I think this is really where you kind of start to see like a pivotal moment for him. In 2020, he was in the French F4 Championship and he finished third. And obviously, 2020 was a year that I think, quite frankly, most people want to forget. But that was, I would say, kind of a like pinnacle moment of the change in his career. And that was when he was starting to see real success within what he was doing. And I think he realized, okay, this actually like could go somewhere. So
Mhm.
from then, he then moved up to F3 spec cars in 2021 and was racing in the F3 Asian Championship, as well as FRECA, which is the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine. And he finished 5th in that championship, which then led him to be picked up by Red Bull.
Yeah.
And he joined their junior program. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. This is
Yeah.
really when those big talks are happening. He is needing to have his like mum there as his manager, and like the big stuff is starting to happen. He like without his mum right now, he wouldn't be having those talks. This is where the big bucks are coming in. Getting picked up by Red Bull at this age is so crucial to how the rest of his career plays out. Like, we see it all the time now. Drivers are being picked up by F1 teams, and then that is what is getting them to where they are now. Most of these drivers on the grid would have been part of junior programs. Red Bull is known for their junior program, whether that is because of controversy or because of success. And this then led Isack to be able to then step up into F3 as well. So before he moved straight on to F3, he was in the Formula Regional Asian Championship in 2022. And this is the first time that he paired with High-Tech GP.
Mhm.
He finished third, which then also led him to join High-Tech for the FIA Formula 3 season, where he then finished fourth, and he had 4 wins and 5 podiums that year. So already we're starting to see that, he's going to be a big name in a year or two, especially if he goes to move on to Formula 2, which, as you can probably predict where this is going, he does continue to move on to
Spoiler
F2
alert.
again with High-Tech. But not only was he then in Formula 2, he then also got a promotion from Red Bull to then be one of their test drivers. And then he was doing that for Red Bull, but also for AlphaTauri, which is now VCub. And again, had some good success, got to, test out these cars that he's one day hoping to see success in and hoping that he'll get to drive. And in 2024, he continued in F2, finishing second. Now, I know that at the start I said that, he'd had some success in his junior career, but, he still wasn't really a big name. Despite
Mm-hmm.
finishing second, I feel like not all of the focus was on Isack. I feel like people didn't really talk about his name that much in association with F1, which is really strange when he was highly backed by Red Bull. Like, they really, really saw a lot in him and his potential. But that kind of got overshadowed a little bit by all the drama that was happening at Red Bull and VCARB with Sergio Perez and how he's performing was like at Red Bull. But you've got Daniel Ricciardo and you've got Liam Lawson at VCARB and Yuki, like, and all of these names kind of overshadowed what was going to happen with Isack Hadjar, because no one knew what was going on. Is Daniel leaving the sport? Is he not? Is Perez leaving the sport? Is he not? What's happening with Liam Lawson? Is Yuki being promoted? All of this turmoil was happening at the same time, and poor Isack was just kind of sat there, like, waiting to know what was going to happen with him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that kind of leads us on to stepping up as Red Bull's and VCARB's reserve driver before, obviously, in 2025, making his debut for VCARB. And as we've kind of touched on, he had a pretty successful season.
Yeah.
So that is kind of it, like a nutshell of how he has progressed. And I think it has been massively his sponsorship with Red Bull, and also his like dynamic with High Tech and being part of their team for such a long time, and not just it being in one series as well, but being across multiple series.
Yeah. I think like in that kind of like nutshell review of kind of how he's moved up the ranks, what you see with him is just he's consistently moving. And I think a lot with a lot of these rookies, Jack Doohan comes to mind, like they kind of get to a certain point in their career and they sit. And I think that's also probably why Isack might have gotten a little lost in the shuffle. Obviously, there was a lot going on with Red Bull at the time in the F1 world, and not a lot of rookie names that weren't already there were being brought up, and in the mix, and also the Daniel Ricciardo of it all. As well. But I think with him, and he made this point in an interview I listened to this morning, or he did the Talking Bulls podcast, Red Bulls podcast, but he said he's never driven the same car really more than twice, which is really, really interesting. And because of the constant moving he's been able to do, he always is moving a step up, a step up, a step up. I think also something that maybe why his voice or why his name wasn't really in the mix for coming up to Formula One was because he had never won a junior championship before, which is actually kind of rare. We often see a lot of these rookies, they've won some championship somewhere. And he had never. So I think that's as well why a lot of people didn't think he was in the mix at the time. Also, something I really wanted to point out, and a point that he made on several interviews that I saw that he did, was he really kind of talks about how his karting days were quite frustrating for him, and that he really found more of his groove when he got into that single-seater world, and you can see that from his progression. But he said, like, with karting, it's easy to be fast as long as you have the fastest and the newest thing. And he was like, for him, there were two things kind of going against him in karting. Is one, like you mentioned, Daniela, a lot of these people don't have the money to buy the best engine, the newest kart, the newest chassis, to support the talent that's in the seat. And he said that was very much the case for him. His family didn't have the money to buy the newest and greatest things. So at the age he was racing, that was kind of already going against him when it came to being able to be fast. He said there was a certain point where he just wasn't fast, and it wasn't because of his skill, it was because of what was underneath him. And then two, he just talked about how, there's 24 karting races in a year, and because again of money, he was only racing in about the 8 main races he could race in. So to think about if he didn't get that chance with the single seater and racing in Freca and in that winter series, how different his history could have been, his story could have been, if he wasn't able to get some of those other chances. And I also just found that interesting, kind of an insight into the karting world. Obviously, especially here in the US, like that's not really a big thing here. It's not televised for sure, and we're not going to karting races to hear about these things. So to hear how he really felt he started to really settle into his skill when he got into that single-seater is really cool. And I think his track record shows that, obviously, from what you just went through as well, the success he had. And it's just an interesting thing. He said he felt more comfortable in F4 than he did in karts. That's a direct quote from one of the articles I was reading about him. And I find that interesting because often you hear it's the other way around. Like, you get in the car and it's like your spot. You know this is your destiny and that's where you feel comfortable. And for him, it didn't really seem to have that click until he got into single-seater and into F4. Do you find that interesting, Daniela, that maybe like Isack Hadjar as a driver, he really didn't feel like it clicked and developed until he got into that single-seater? Really quick, guys, I want to talk about our sponsor, which I'm so proud to be the owner of, which is Grand Prix Girl. If you didn't know, Grand Prix Girl really started with a simple frustration. It's me and my mom. We've loved F1 for so long, but we couldn't find merchandise made for women, which kind of blew our minds, seeing that women make up now over 43% of the F1 fan base. So we decided to make our own. Yes, that's right. We went into business together and we started making our own F1 merch. The brand is called Grand Prix Girl. Grand Prix Girl offers jewelry in race day style designs exclusively for female F1 fans. We keep you guys top of mind every time we are designing something, and our brand is truly all around female Formula One and motorsports fans. You can shop our best-selling products like our paddock pendant and even our new double stack bracelets that just came out at grandprixgirl.com. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok as well at Grand Prix Girl, and we hope you come join us over in our community. We are really proud to sponsor this podcast, and we are so, so proud and honored to bring you merch made for female fans. So again, go check us out at grandprixgirl.com, and back to the podcast.
Yeah, I think that I find it interesting because if you look on paper, he didn't have the strongest career in karting, as you've said.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it interesting that from then he was able to make that step up, because he didn't really have the evidence to prove that he would do well in single seaters or in the Ginetta Junior Winter Series, because his results weren't really there, because again, it always comes down to money. If you don't have the sponsorship to drive, then you can't prove yourself. And so he then makes that step up, which I feel like was a little bit unexpected. But not only that, he gets to race in multiple categories throughout a season. And I think that this is a really important thing to mention, because if in this industry, in this world of this sport, you don't get much track time. It's not like tennis where you can just, whenever you like, go outside and hit the ball. You genuinely can only go in that car when you have got allocated track time. And to get that track time, you need to be with a team and you need to prove on yourself. He was then able to be in multiple championships throughout the year, which equals more track time, which then means that he has more of a chance to prove himself, but also learn how to adapt to different cars, get networking. There were so many reasons that his career has laid out the way it is, but I genuinely believe that's because he was able to get in with multiple championships. And I think that's to do with his relationship with Hitech, because they saw his potential and were like, okay, we can put him in this championship and this championship and this championship, and then that led for him to progress. We've seen it time and time again when drivers have not been able to have had enough track time, that their careers become a little bit stagnant and then we see them drop off. A great example of this is drivers who have won F2 but have been unsuccessful in progressing, especially when they have their heart set on Formula One and then they go 3 years without driving. And we've seen it multiple times. I'm going to use Felipe Dragovic as an example. He won F2. He was eagerly waiting for that F1 seat that he never got, because sometimes that's just how this world works. There are drivers already in that seat, they're not budging, and you lose out.
Yeah.
But he then went 3 years without driving and then made this transition to Formula E. But these drivers aren't then using their initiative to be okay, actually the most beneficial thing for me right now is track time, where I feel like that's what Isack knew. He knew that karting wasn't for him. He managed to make that step up to F4, realised, actually, you know what, I'm good at this. I'm going to network more. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to see how I can get more track time. And then his career completely blossomed from there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the more track time you have and the more experience you have in driving different types and in different series is beneficial for you to become a better, well-rounded driver. And your relationships, like you mentioned, high tech, obviously his relationship with Red Bull later on in his career, all play crucial roles. And it is kind of like a started from the bottom, now you're here story, honestly. I think he, like we said, he's kind of not really, his name really wasn't thrown around a ton, wasn't in the mouths of a lot of big players, and here we are. He's in the Red Bull seat for 2026. I would have never predicted or even thought of him as an option. Because we had Yuki Tsunoda sitting in that car for so long, Liam Lawson with this long predicted kind of talent coming through. I don't, he was so off the radar, but now he's so very much on the radar of a lot of people, and I think it goes to show. I think something that also makes Isack stand out amongst a lot of these younger drivers now, and something I didn't know until I started really kind of doing research for this episode, was he really, really takes an effort to understand the engineering. And I think that's something we don't see a ton in these younger drivers, which I think has made Isack stand out a lot. Talks a lot about his capacity to hold information, whether that is the information coming through his ear in the race or the information when he's out of the cockpit sitting there with his engineers. He wants to understand. He wants to know how it works and how it ticks. And he credits working with Sebastian Vettel's former engineer, known as Rocky, for helping him understand and learn the engineering side of things. He even called him his personal engineer. He said he would call him or text him with random questions, and he would always be there willing to answer and explain. And I think that's a really important aspect to Isaac's success as well. Daniela, do you think that kind of having that engineering understanding and making an effort to at least know what's going on from an engineering aspect has kind of been a lost art, that maybe is something that's going to need to come back into play, especially with these new 2026 regulations going on right now?
I definitely think that this is something that all drivers should be taking advantage of. And they used to. It used to be a thing where
Yeah.
sometimes drivers would stay late with all the engineers, be kind of looking at them rebuilding the cars, having these conversations, like understanding the mechanics and the engineering aspects of how these cars actually work. And I think once they understand those, that is just going to make them stronger as a driver. And I found it an interesting point when you mentioned Sebastian Vettel's engineer, because Sebastian Vettel was someone who used to be interested in the engineering side of things and be having these conversations and learning and taking interest. And I feel like a whole generation now has gone by where drivers haven't been doing that. So
Yeah.
I find that quite like the fact that he's taken this initiative to go, okay, this is where my knowledge lacks. Maybe understanding these fundamentals are going to help me perform as a driver, because I'm going to start seeing things from how my race engineer sees them and how those working on my car see them. And maybe we can all work together as a team. Like, yes, a driver sits in their car and drives alone, but they have a whole team around them that make the whole operation work. And I think rather than kind of having the driver act kind of almost on their own wheel, and then you've got them working separately, it's kind of combining that together and kind of making that dream team, which I feel like is how Isack has been approaching his F1 career so far. And I think that's what made him stand out in 2025, because he had been putting in that effort to really understand the team and for the team to understand him, and they're kind of that unity kind of forming together. And in my mind, it's paid off, because he's had a really strong season, and that only excites me heading into 2026. And as you said, Brianna, 2026 regulations is a massive, massive change. We've got this whole new element of electricity playing into this, with the power engines becoming 50-50 or almost 50-50 electric to combustion. And so this is a really crucial time for drivers to actually learn and understand what is going on with these cars. They're going to need to know this information more now than ever, because it's going to be nothing like they have driven before. Unless they have had the opportunity to drive Formula E car, which off the top of my head, I don't think a single driver on this grid has had the opportunity, then they are going to really struggle. And this is going to be the time that having those chats and making time to understand what is going on and giving time with their engineers is going to be game changing. And I think that right now Isack is doing all of the right things for a successful 2026.
Yeah, I agree. I think the drivers that have this outlook on understanding this engineering and also the strategy portion, and have that passion to learn, to be like a sponge basically and absorb everything around them. One is going to give them a leg up, like you said, in these new 2026 regulations, because it's going to be needed more than ever, the understanding of how this car is working. And two, it just increases the success of your communication with your team. The better you understand what you're doing from a holistic approach instead of just like the driver, the better communication and better problem solving you're going to have with your strategists and engineers, because you're all speaking the same language. You're not trying to translate each other's words, basically. And I think that's going to give the drivers like Isack a leg up, in this 2026 season. And I think we'll see the drivers that haven't been doing that kind of struggle during this year. But I love that Isack is just like that. It like you said, we saw this way back in the day. It brings me all the way back to like Enzo Ferrari being a mechanic first, and getting in there with his team and ripping the car apart. Michael Schumacher classically would be in the garage all night with his engineers, like learning the parts of the car and how they work together and how to take it apart and put it back together. It's so important. I know these drivers have more responsibilities than they ever had. They're not just drivers. They're also personality and a marketing piece and a spokesperson and a foundation owner and all these other things. But I think this is a really important piece that Isack has gotten right throughout his career and has given him a leg up his entire career, because like you said, he wasn't necessarily the bright shining star and the first choice on everyone's top of their list, but he's made it there because of the extra things that he's done in his career to get him to that place, which is really interesting. And I think such an old school mindset for such a young kid. In one of the interviews I was watching as well, they said Isack Hadjar has been alive as long as Red Bull has been a team, which is crazy to think. Like, he's just as old as the team is. Like, it's wild. But just goes to show that sometimes old school thinking is still very applicable to some parts of the sport today. Daniela, did you hear about the story about how he got signed to Red Bull Juniors?
No, so please tell me.
Yeah, I found this such an interesting and cool story, but you mentioned obviously him racing in Freca. He won the Freca race in Monaco, and basically he just was on a high, and his mom called him and was like, Helmut Marko wants to meet you at the Monte Carlo tomorrow night. And he's like, okay, and he said he showed up, and Helmut Marko was like, we want to sign you. Here are the papers. And he was like, okay, and then ta-da. So he said actually getting into like the junior program and into into the other F series was actually a lot easier than some of his other career. He said he was just on an absolute high from winning Monaco and then having that happen. And again, I think that is a testament to like what he preaches, is you don't just need the skill, the timing is everything as well. And I think if you look throughout his entire career, it's honestly been the skill and the timing have just come together beautifully for him, which is really, really great. Did you have any fun facts that you learned about Isack while doing this research that you found interesting or surprising to you?
Yeah, I found out that he really loves French rap, like that's his favorite music. He doesn't like karaoke, so he's unsure about ever doing like a karaoke night with like Yuki and Pierre, but maybe he would perform some French rap. He also can like speak French and English, but he's been learning Italian, and can understand bits of Arabic. And then he also, which I like find this quite strange, he was asked in an interview if he could ever if he could just do another career for a day, what would he do? And he was like, I'd choose being an astronaut every day. And normally when you ask a driver this question, they usually say something sport related or an engineer. Like, it's always usually within that realm. Or unless you're Yuki and you say that you want to own a restaurant and be a chef. But this one for me just was so different to anything I've ever heard from any driver across multiple series. And I really respect that. So
Yeah.
I would quite like I'd pay to see Isack go in a rocket to space and to see
Yeah.
what happens.
Elon needs to send him up there. I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me as much because his dad is a physicist, which if you also didn't know, he does have some equations on the back of his helmet, which every year, well, so far, we don't know what his helmet looks like in 2026, but it's kind of like an ode to his dad, which is pretty cool. And something, again, I've never seen a math equation on the back of any driver's helmet. Honestly, that would probably be more the engineer's notebooks than the helmet. But I think that's really cool. But because his dad is a physicist, that actually doesn't surprise me that much because often my husband's brother is a physics major or has a physics degree, and he's very fascinated with space because there's so much physics involved with space. So it doesn't surprise me too much actually, but that would be cool. And also he has enough money now to get on one of those SpaceX flights or Amazon Katy Perry flights, whatever you want to call them. To the moon. So, but I love that for him. And also, most F1 drivers are adrenaline junkies. So, that's probably the next fastest thing he could drive or be in would be a spaceship, honestly. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll invent spaceship racing. I don't know. He'll be able to combine his loves for something together. But really quick, let's round out this deep dive of Isack Hadjar with his first rookie season, which we all witnessed last year, which honestly, a phenomenal one. Did you expect him to do this well in his rookie season, Daniela?
No, I was not expecting it. And I think I said this at the start of the episode that despite kind of having a good junior career, although he didn't win a single championship, I think that because his name kind of got a bit lost and how he had performed in test sessions, I really didn't have that much high expectations. And then in Australia, the first race of the season, he didn't even start because he crashed in the formation lap, and it was all just a whole thing that I was like, oh, this isn't a good look. But then this guy came in and then he was getting consistent in the points, and I was like, okay, maybe I got this wrong. And then he got his first podium, and I may or may not have gotten a little bit emotional because I just felt so proud. Just seeing someone be able to go from how he was in Australia, absolutely heartbroken, almost just a shell. He was so distraught, to then being on that podium and seeing him absolutely beaming. I just felt like a little proud mum. I was like, yes, go on, Oscar. Oscar, Isack. And then, yeah, he just continued to blow me away for the whole season.
Yep.
And we had a lot of rookies this year, so he was in contention to be the best rookie of the year. I didn't realize kind of how much of a clean sweep he was going to take with that. But I think everyone would pretty much agree that he was the one to look out for, and I'm excited to see what he does in 2026.
Yeah, honestly, for me, the moment I knew he was going places was actually his 2 performances after Australia. The way he was able to come back, just one from a crash on your first ever Formula 1 race, and you didn't crash in the race, you crashed in the warm-up, the formation lap. And I can see that picture of him walking in the paddock back with Lewis's dad so clearly. That's like burned into my brain. And honestly, that could ruin, make or break somebody. Like your spirit, he was obviously so crushed and like you could just feel him beating up on himself. And the fact that he was able to come back in China and place in 11th, like just out of the points there. And then in Japan, the following race, score his first ever points. Like to be able to come from that low and just put it in the back seat and get back to it, like that is what makes a good driver. When you can align the skill, the team, and your mental health and mindset together and come back like that, that says something. That's like a green flag telltale that you've got something here. And I think as scared as I am for him to sit in that second Red Bull seat, I'm scared for anybody to sit in that second Red Bull seat. But the fact that Christian Horner's gone, we've got a little bit new Red Bull leadership, the new regulations, so he's kind of starting from scratch as well alongside Max Verstappen. I think he can do it. He's been the first driver that I've been like felt confident. And any other driver they put in there, including Checo Perez, I was like, no. Like, but with him, I'm like, he can. I think he can. And that for those first 3 races of his rookie season are the reason why I think he can. Obviously, the track record then the rest of the season is just more indication that he can do it. But yeah, I'm so excited to watch. And obviously, whenever this episode comes out, we'll see where he is. But I think he'll just be one to watch this season and one I'll be keeping my eye out for every single race, no matter where he is. I just pray the curse. I pray he breaks it. Dear Lord, hear us now. Please break the curse on the second Red Bull seat with Isack Hadjar. Amen. Or to whatever God you pray to. Like, I don't know. But, because I just think, and I think he knows it too, that this 2026 season will be very crucial for his career. But I think he's got everything going for him at the moment. He just got to put down his head and keep himself focused. Do you think the curse will be broken, Daniela?
Yeah, I think that I have quite a lot of faith in him, and I think it's because I've kind of heard through different journalists and stuff that his driving style is quite similar to Max's, so that makes me keen to see actually if maybe his style will then really suit the Red Bull. Obviously with regulation changes, that does make me a little bit apprehensive, but I think that if anyone can kind of challenge Max, I genuinely think that it's going to be Isack, and I cannot wait to see how that plays. And I really hope that when this episode goes live, Isaac's had some really stellar performances. Otherwise, we're going to look really silly right now.
Listen, we have hope, okay? That's not silly at all. Thumbs up. Sorry if you're not watching this YouTube, guys. It's an inside joke. Watch our YouTube videos and you'll know. But something also I forgot to mention, I wanted to mention earlier, but another reason why I have some confidence in him is I have heard that he's treated a bit differently by Helmut Marko. So let me go into a little bit in depth. A lot of junior Red Bull drivers talk about the dreaded Monday morning call from Helmut Marko to talk about your race that happened on Sunday. Isack said Helmut Marko has never called him on a Monday to discuss his race. Also, when he crashed in Australia, Helmut Marko was just like, it's okay. Get back on it in China. You'll be fine. And that Helmut Marko has really never called him ever, where a lot of other junior drivers have talked about the dreaded Helmut Marko Monday call, the dreaded random call from Helmut Marko on a weekday to talk about their career, their performance, and what they need to do. And Isack has said he's not had that. And that to me, as much as like, listen, Helmut Marko is Helmut Marko, I don't agree with the majority of things that man says. But if there is one thing that he does well, it's finding talent and developing it. And the fact that he hasn't really called Isack Hadjar to have some of those conversations tells me the level of trust that Helmut Marko seems to have in him is unparalleled to some of these other juniors. Am I reading too much into that, Daniela? Or like, do you think that's true?
I think that's so true. Like, I didn't know this. And I honestly think it's the most unlike a Helmut Marko thing in terms of, I knew about the Monday calls to everybody else. I just didn't know that Isack wasn't getting them himself. And I genuinely think that shows how much faith he has. And I agree with you. I really don't like Helmut Marko, and I don't agree with the majority of things that come out of his mouth. But as you said, he's very good at picking talent. And if Isack is the one to break this curse, then I think like this really shows that he's had the right people backing him from a really early on in his career. Like, I cannot explain how excited I am to see how he does. And I just really hope that Australia doesn't repeat history and repeats what happened to him last year, and that he has a really good positive first race, because I can see a bright future for Isack.
Yeah. And I want to preface, like, that information has come directly from Isack. I heard him, it was in several written interviews that I read and several actual video interviews that I listened to and watched. So that information is coming straight from Isack, and I found it very unusual. And I think it's a sign of the trust that not just Helmut Marko has in him, but the team as well. So interesting little tidbit there. So yeah, I'm so excited to watch his career continue further. And I hope that this deep dive episode has given you guys a little bit more knowledge on a newer member. He's 2 years now he'll be on this F1 grid, and he kind of was just like this unsung hero, I think, that we wanted to give you guys more information on and a deeper dive into what his career has looked like, who he is as a person, how he got into Formula One, and what has made his career so successful. I think if there's anything I wish for Isack is that his 2026 season this year is stellar, and that he's able to take just how he's run the rest of his career into this Red Bull seat. Daniela, do you have any hopes and wishes for Isack Hadjar here? Do you see him possibly being a championship winner?
In the future, yes, but I'm not going to say so for this year just because I don't think Red Bull is going to be quite up there. I don't think it's going to be the number one slot. But I am hoping for multiple podiums from Isack this year. And maybe towards the end of the season, maybe, fingers crossed, I'm really going to be praying for this. A potential race win could be on the cards.
Are you remaining optimistic?
I'm remaining optimistic, baby.
We're here. We're remaining optimistic for Isack Hadjar in 2026 and beyond. You guys, thank you again for joining us for this episode. If you would like more of this type of deep dive content, let us know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss another episode. And as always, we bring you all types of content, race reviews, interviews. We've got so much planned for you this season and for this podcast and beyond. So make sure to tune in, subscribe to that podcast wherever you listen to us, or watch us possibly on YouTube. But until next time, you guys, we will see you in the fast lane. Bye-bye.
Hello, fly chick coming through. Nice to meet you, glad you came too.